Hello, ladies. Welcome back to Feme Soul. This is an offshoot of Women Out the Box. Where you can find that information is on Instagram, Women Out the Box INC. And we are still in our series on how I got out the box, evading domestic violence and extreme homelessness, where I found myself at in the land that was given to me, and kind of some of the things that I utilized to not wear abuse and homelessness, and to kind of take myself out of the victim mentality. So prior to, we were discussing the land that was left to me, what I utilized to kind of get up and over the onslaught of domestic violence and extreme homelessness. And a lot of that was centered around diet and exercise, but it was also the mental consumption of some form of spirituality, right? And so when I say spirituality, it doesn't have to just be the parameter of religion. Remember, the cosmology of believing in a higher source predates what we know as modern religion. So that is the monotheistic aspect of religion. So you have Christianity, Mosheism, and Islam. And so those are kind of like the building blocks of what we know as modern day religion. But prior to what we know as the formality of religion was the innate energy that we carried, right? So if we felt an energy that was off, we would go in a different direction. And so I'm more so leaning into the spiritual aspect of listening and observing and exercising silence. And so in this particular episode, I want to talk about how I got out of the box insofar as pivoting. So we last left off on the legacy of a thing, right? This thing that we're creating our life, right? And what we hope to pass on to our grandchildren or our great great grandchildren 200 and 300 years from now. You know what I'm saying? And so a big part of how I was able to get out of the box was my ability to pivot. So sometimes, as humans, when we go through the stage of losing, right, we take everything personal. And so, because we have been going it the same way all this time, we feel like, well, I should be committed to that and stay down for that, instead of recognizing that this may be a perfect time to pivot. So, what do we mean when we say pivot? So, if we think of the physical aspect of pivoting, that is literally changing your body into another direction. But we know that those actions first start in the mind. And so when we begin to change the mind, then we begin to change the outcome. And so I was able to pivot in some of the spaces that needed to be revamped, right? One example that I can give is employment. So even though I was going through domestic violence, extreme homelessness, and then eventually a full-on DCFS case, I still had to get up and go to work, right? There was no downtime, if you will, right? So my obligations were there, right? But in the back of my mind, I know that I'm supposed to be doing something greater. I'm supposed to be speaking or teaching or just something that leaves a mark, right? And I knew that working at these jobs was not doing it, or so I thought, right? So on the back end, I was exercising some level of faith. I was still committed to the aspect of myself that's still willing to give it a good go and get up and go to work. But on the surface, I was being viewed and seen by people who were literally telling me to my face, why are you at this job? Why are you doing this? I can tell by the way you speak that you're supposed to be doing something else. I can tell by the way that you are making yourself up. You're supposed to be doing something else. And it stung. It felt some type of way that these strangers could see me in a space that I hadn't seen myself. Or maybe not even in a space that I hadn't seen myself. I wasn't willing to go after it, right? And so playing small didn't allow me to pivot. I was still staying in the same mental structure, right? Regardless if I had spoken to the Most High and said, look, this is what I want to do with my life, A, B, and C, I was still in that small mindset. I wasn't ready to pivot, right? And so for me, the pivot just means a different route, right? The destination never changed, but the route did. And I think once we as humans kind of take our hands off of the wheel and recognize that the destination, the outcome, is the objective. The way in which we get there is not necessarily important. Now, obviously, you don't want to be beat up and raggedy when you make it to the destination, but the route can change, and that's okay. And so once I realized that I was willing to go with the flow, pivot, I was willing to go in whatever direction led me to the intended outcome, which was to be of service, to help, to aid, to teach, that kind of thing, right? And so initially, my objective was to create these boxes, right? I really wanted to get in between that space of a woman needing and or deciding to go back to a volatile situation because she didn't have the resources she needed to leave. And so I thought that that was enough, right? I thought that I was doing my part. I thought that that was the answer. And then it just like hit me over the head that the same courses and programs that I have online, the same countless hours of videos that I have online teaching women, right, the valuing system of femininity from a woman, not from a man's point of view, but from a woman, that was something that I had to give. And ding, 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 we begin to pivot. So I'm not beholden to, oh, I got to make these boxes and that's the only thing that I can contribute and that's the thing. No. The name Women Out the Box was originally Exodus. And so in my mind, Exodus was like a quintessential name. It defined the movement of these women, you know, going to their light at the end of the tunnel. Couldn't have that name. And so the name changed like 3 times until we got Women Out the Box. And so if I was dead set on that name, I would probably still be there, right? And so if I was dead set on just the boxes, I would still be there. And so my goals include actually teaching women at homeless shelters, in homeless shelters. There is something about feeling forgotten. There's something about feeling unheard. There's something about that space where you feel like you're the only one going through this. You're the only one feeling this. And I know that I can intercede in that moment to say, hey, that's not true. There is strength in numbers. And although this isn't a trauma bonding experience, we definitely can pull from each other the strength that we need to survive, to thrive, to go to the highest levels, and allow these stories to just be the backdrop. They're not even the main thing, right? And so I initially, like I said, wanted those boxes, and I wanted them to be in police stations and the hospitals, right? Because those are kind of touchdown spaces for women experiencing domestic violence or homelessness to get into shelters, right? And so I would want those boxes waiting for them. Well, then the thought came to me that that wasn't enough. It wasn't enough to just give these women these items. Someone has to pour into them. If the cup runneth over, it is now our duty to give to those that are thirsty, those that need to be refreshed, those that need their thirst quenched. And it is not just the tangible things, but it's reaching into the core of a person and saying, I see you. I hear you. I too wanted this thing in this moment. And here comes the thing for the moment. Like when we hold on to what we think we are, what we think we know, what we think we can do, we are actually boxing ourselves in. And when I recognize that pivoting is not a bad thing, change is not a bad thing, I can do this, then it stopped being about me. I stopped centering myself. And that is something that I will have to continue to do because it's not about me. It's about the service. It's about the work. It's about the work. My grandfather um, bought the home next. Well, he bought a whole bunch of houses on the block, but he bought the house next door to him, I think first, and turned that home into a home for veterans coming home from the war. So he fought in Vietnam, if I'm not mistaken. And when he came home, there were no services. Well, it just so happened that my grandfather was internally brilliant and was able to garner over $1 million in property. And he utilized those services to help men that were forgotten about. And I'm so sorry, I'm getting emotional, but when you feel forgotten, when you feel like no one can see you, these are the nameless people that go through life and they fill up the space for the Most High. They fill up the space for purpose. But sometimes they need people to see that purpose in them. And I'm just so grateful that I come from that stock, that my grandfather had enough wherewithal. You know what I'm saying? This is somebody that was raised on a cotton plantation and picked cotton as a kid. And to still be in there and not let society tear you down. He's from LaFleur, Mississippi, which was the #1 lynching place in the world, in America. And to still have that much heart and still want to give and be of service, like, that just moves me. You know what I'm saying? And I want to be like that when I grow up. And so to know that he was able to pull through and push through for those men that didn't know what was on the other side waiting for them, insofar as social service, assistance in rearing and coming out of what was known as shell shock. So it was shell shock before it was PTSD, and there were no services for shell shock victims. And so to know that he was able to acquire that space and utilize it to help those in need, it just moves me, and I hope to be in that same vein. And so, side note, his son, my uncle, Christopher, Uncle Chris, he remodeled that same home, and it was in Reader's Digest. And so that home became my grandmother's home. I'm not sure if she still lives there, but he revamped this house and turned it into this beautiful, like, it was just spectacular. And like I said, it was in Reader's Digest, and he too went on to continue to build homes for Habitat for Humanity. So I really come from a family of service. My grandmother, my mother and uncle's mother was a nurse. My mother was a nurse. My mother had a technology school in the 90s, teaching elderly people and children how to use Windows 95 and Windows 96 and 97 and 98 and 99, right? And so I come from this. This is innate in me. And so when people say that they see in me the thing that I come from, I have to live up to it. And I can't do that if I think it's only one way to do it. There's several ways to accomplish the goal. And I want you to know that just because you're wherever you're at on the journey doesn't mean that that road doesn't lead to the intended outcome. And so once again, until we meet again, please remember that it is not enough to just be pretty. You must be pretty on purpose. And once again, until we meet again, peace. Bye, guys.